Food chains and food webs. Food chains and food webs are both ways of visualizing the transfer of energy and nutrients between different organisms in an ecosystem. A food chain is a linear sequence of organisms, starting with a producer, a photosynthetic organism that makes its own food, and ending with a top predator. Each organism in the chain is consumed by the next organism in sequence. For example, a simple food chain in a grassland ecosystem might look like grass, grasshopper, frog, snake, hawk. In this example, the grass is the producer, the grasshopper is the primary consumer, the frog is the secondary consumer, the snake is the tertiary consumer, and the hawk is the top predator. A food web, on the other hand, is a more complex and interconnected network of food chains within an ecosystem. It includes all of the food chains and feeding relationships in an ecosystem, with multiple paths for energy and nutrient flow between different organisms. In a food web, each organism can occupy multiple positions with respect to different food chains or trophic levels. An example of a food web in a grassland ecosystem might include grass, grasshopper, frog, snake, hawk. Grass, mouse, snake, hawk. In this example, the grass is still the primary producer, but the food web shows that grasshoppers, mice, snakes, and hawks can all occupy multiple positions in different food chains. Food webs are generally more realistic representations of energy and nutrient flow in an ecosystem than food chains, since they take into account the complexity and interconnectedness of the ecosystem. Examples of food chains. Here are some examples of food chains in different ecosystems. 1. Forest ecosystem. Trees, deer, coyote, mountain lion. 2. Oceanic ecosystem. Phytoplankton, zooplankton, small fish, medium fish, large fish, shark. 3. Arctic ecosystem. Phytoplankton, krill, arctic cod, seal, polar bear. 4. Grassland ecosystem. Grass, grasshopper, mouse, snake, hawk. 5. Desert ecosystem. Cactus, desert rat, rattlesnake, hawk. In each of these examples, the arrows represent the flow of energy and nutrients from the prey to the predator. The first organism in the food chain is always a producer, such as a plant or a photosynthetic organism, while the last organism is usually a top predator, such as a carnivorous mammal or bird. Describing a food web. A food web is a complex, interconnected network of producers, consumers, and decomposers in an ecosystem. In a food web, each organism feeds on and is eaten by multiple other organisms, creating a complex web of relationships. For example, consider a food web in a freshwater ecosystem. Producers, algae and aquatic plants are the main producers in the ecosystem. They use energy from the sun to produce organic matter through photosynthesis. Primary consumers, small herbivorous animals, such as zooplankton and small fish, eat the algae and aquatic plants to obtain their energy and nutrients. Secondary consumers, larger predatory fish, such as bass and pike, feed on the smaller herbivorous animals to obtain their energy and nutrients. Tertiary consumers, top predators, such as otters and eagles, feed on the larger predatory fish to obtain their energy and nutrients. Decomposers, bacteria and fungi break down dead organic matter, returning the nutrients back into the ecosystem for reuse. The food web in this ecosystem is complex and interconnected, with many different organisms having multiple roles in the web. For example, a species of bird might feed on both small fish and aquatic insects, making it a part of multiple food chains. Additionally, the removal of one species from the ecosystem can have cascading effects on the rest of the food web, leading to imbalances and changes in the overall ecosystem. Significance of food chains and food webs in real-life situations. Food chains and food webs have significant importance in our daily lives in the natural world. Here are a few reasons why. 1. Understanding ecosystem dynamics. Food chains and food webs help us understand the complex relationships between organisms in an ecosystem and how they depend on each other for survival. It helps identify the species that are particularly vulnerable and prone to decline if disrupted. 2. Predicting the impact of environmental disruptions. Knowledge of food chains and food webs can help us predict the extent and severity of impacts of natural disasters, resource exploitation, climate change, and human activities, and the impact on the entire ecosystem. 3. Managing natural resources. Food chains and food webs are essential tools for resource management. Knowledge of food web structure enables us to identify controls or limiters of populations, including disease, predation, competition, and other factors, which in turn are significant for the proper management strategies. 4. Designing conservation plans. Conservation plans for endangered species often rely on understanding and managing interactions within food webs. Efforts to protect threatened plant species, for example, may depend on ensuring adequate pollinator populations to complete their food chains. 5. Supporting human well-being. Ultimately, food chains and food webs support the health and well-being of human beings. For instance, fisheries and forestry, as well as land management, requires knowledge of the intricate food web relationships between critical species. In addition, the understanding of the nutritional quality of food for human consumption is directly correlated to the primary producers and its position in the food chain. Revision Exercise 3.3. 1. Distinguish between food web and food chain. A food chain is a linear sequence of organisms where each organism is eaten by the next in a straight line, starting with a primary producer. A food web, on the other hand, is a complex network of interconnected food chains that show the flow of energy and nutrients between multiple organisms and trophic levels. While a food chain follows a simple linear pathway of energy transfer, a food web depicts a more complex and realistic picture of the feeding relationships in an ecosystem. 2. Give the name of I, the bacteria that converts nitrates into nitrites and ammonia. 2. A nitrifying bacterium that converts ammonia into nitrites. 3. A nitrifying bacterium that converts nitrates into nitrites. B. State 2 ways through which nitrogen is made available to the plant. I. Nitrosomonas bacteria convert nitrates into nitrites and ammonia. 2. Nitrosomonas bacteria converts ammonia into nitrites. 3. Nitrobacter bacteria converts nitrites into nitrates. B. 2 ways through which nitrogen is made available to plant are I. Nitrogen fixation. Some bacteria convert nitrogen from the atmosphere into a usable form for plants such as ammonia and nitrates that plants can absorb from the soil. 2. Decomposition. Breakdown of dead organic matter by decomposers, bacteria and fungi, releases nitrogen into the soil in the form of ammonium ions which are also available to plants. 3. Name 2 examples of leguminous plants. B. Briefly discuss the role played by each of the following in an ecosystem. I. Green plants. 2. Bacteria and fungi. 2 examples of leguminous plants are I. Soybeans. 2. Peas. B. I. Green plants are primary producers in an ecosystem as they are capable of producing their food via photosynthesis, which is the process of converting sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose and oxygen. Primary productivity is the rate at which photosynthesis occurs, and this provides the base of the food chain by being a direct or indirect source of food and energy for organisms in higher trophic levels. Additionally, green plants also contribute to the regulation of atmospheric gases since they produce oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide. 2. Bacteria and fungi are decomposers in an ecosystem as they break down the dead organic matter produced by organisms at all trophic levels into simpler inorganic compounds, such as carbon dioxide, water, nitrogen, and essential nutrients. This process of decomposition plays a vital role in nutrient cycling, which makes essential nutrients available to plants through their roots and supports the growth of other decomposer organisms, herbivores, and carnivores in the food web. Furthermore, bacteria and fungi are responsible for nitrogen fixation, converting atmospheric nitrogen into ammonium and nitrate ions, which are available to plants, and nutrient uptake. By absorbing nutrients that are not easily available to plants themselves,